All right, thanks for having me. I always joke with John about his his preference in the use of forestry torch versus Panama, which we like in Nebraska. And he always reminds me, following, he's like, yeah, we burn more acres than you. And I'm like, oh, that's good. But John, I drove through Oklahoma City this year, and I could say that we have more teeth per capita than you guys do down in Oklahoma now. So, sorry, I always got to get a jab in at John in Oklahoma. So. Again, thanks for having me. I've been the Nebraska Pheasants Forever fire coordinator since about 2015 or so. And before that, I was a farm-bill biologist, like many of the people you talked about or heard from in the room here in South Dakota. So I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've done in Nebraska to really kind of help build a fire culture. And I would say our state's kind of an emerging fire culture. We've made leaps and bounds and strides over the last 10, 15, 20 years. So I'm going to talk a little bit about kind of what we're doing and kind of specifically with Pheasants Forever. But there's a lot of other organizations and stuff that are doing great things, but I would literally be up here for like a whole afternoon, and you don't want to hear me talk the whole afternoon. The first thing I want to talk about when culture, I came across this like normalization process theory where, you're basically taking something that individuals and groups do to operationalize new or modified modes of practice that interact with their environment. It kind of goes through and defines this implementation process. And these are basically things that you do to get, a culture started back up in the case of fire, but really kind of anything you do to build a culture. The one thing with prescribed fire is when you're developing a culture, it takes a village to get a fire culture going versus like maybe like cover crops. Cover crops has been kind of a new thing in the last, number of years. But one person can go out and put a cover crop on the landscape and they don't need, 10 other people to help them out. So fire is one of those things that's really tough because you have to get, 10 of your friends at a minimum to do a prescribed fire. And so that building that village is really important. So we're basically engaging in new ways of acting, thinking, and organizing, and we're always looking toward the future in terms of, what are the best ways to do that, the best practices to do that. So it basically just becomes like routinely embedded in that process of what we're doing, how we're acting, all the different things to build up that culture. And I always say that culture is curated, it's not created. Like I would very happily, if I could snap my fingers and say, hey, we've got a fire culture now. But I'm telling you, it doesn't happen. It takes work and sustainability, not only in the parts of the agency organizations, but also landowners. Landowners are the key to that, building that culture. We're just kind of here to help facilitate some of those things and throw money around too. But I saw this quote the other day. Some guy was giving a talk, and he said, repetition creates muscle memory. You don't have to think about it anymore. You just know how to do it. You know how to tie off a narrow canyon. You can know where a spot fire is going to develop. You know where to position a crew, all without thinking about it. The more we talk about fire, the more we do fire, and the more we are successful at fire, the more second nature that fire is going to become. And that is all a process of developing a fire culture within a state or within your area. So what I'm really going to talk about is kind of like cultural development. And so when we talk about cultural development, I'm going to kind of go through and talk about our outreach, our education, some of the training stuff that we do. We talk about our Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council, some of the programs, funding, equipment, PPA staffing. I'm going to kind of try to hit on all these things. And I could probably talk about one issue for probably half hour at a time. So I'm going to try to, these are kind of some highlights, but the biggest thing is this collaboration that we have within the agencies and NGOs, fire councils. These are a few of them, are prescribed burn associations. When there's a fire that's happening in Nebraska, we have a laundry list of people that we call upon. It may be PFQF that show up. It may be the Nebraska Game and Parks that are helping come to help burn. It could be the Nature Conservancy, Northern Prairies Land Trust, the NRDs, Audubon, NRCS, Grazing Coalition. And I got another slide here that has a bunch more organizations. But the most important one that I look out at is the landowners. The landowners are my priority. I don't care about all of the organizations, NGOs, those things. The landowners are my priority. When I'm talking about fire, we're talking about the landowners and developing that fire culture, because if all of our funding goes away, like if my grant funding gets pulled and all of us disappear, the only people that are going to be left are landowners. Landowners are going to be there to decide how they manage their land. And so they need to be able to have that fire culture and implementing fire because they're fighting for their livelihoods, right? Woody encroachment's a huge issue. I've seen, grown men break down in tears because they don't know what to do anymore with these cedar trees encroaching their pastures. And so we're there to help facilitate that and collaborate on those things. John talked a little bit about the Prescribed Fire Council. In 2015, we formed the Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council. Ours is a little bit unique, as ours is 100% landowner led. There's not a agency board member, there's not an NGO board member. It is all 100% landowner led. So all of our board members are landowners. Now we have advisors for like NGOs and the government, stuff like that help there. And basically I'm the kind of the coordinator for that. And when we go into these board meetings with these landowners, they basically say, we need this, we need this. So we're basically say, yes, all right, we're gonna go break down that barrier, or we're gonna provide assistance here, or do this, or whatever they need. We're basically jumping over fences to do it. They also, again, partner on some grants. Another big thing that we did with the Fire Council, again, that landowner-led, is that political advocacy. No congressman or senator cares about what NGO or state really says about things. But when you got constituents knocking down your door and saying, this is a problem, or I need this done, like they're more likely to listen to you, obviously, because you're the ones that's probably going to be voting them back into office. So we can use that political advocacy tool with a landowner-led type council in order to get some more things done. It's also a good place for a good central hub of information and resources. Everybody has their own websites and everything but it's a good place to just kind of put everything in there. You can have links to different agencies or organizations, but it's a good place for information place. We also put on a conference every year. We just did our 10th anniversary conference. We typically get between 150 to 200 people to come to this conference every year. We have a wide range of topics. One of the cool things that we do is every year we try to get like somebody's first burn. We get up there like they did their first burn, and we want to hear their experience of how they burned and what things they realized and things of that nature. But if you're a QR code person, there's a QR code to a link tree that has all of our Nebraska Prescribed Fire Council stuff in there. We're updating our website currently, all that stuff. The one thing I did want to mention, a couple years ago, a rancher came to us and said, hey, we made these little drip torches, and they were using it as business cards for their PBA. And so we actually had to develop these little drip torch awards that we hand out to landowners every year called the Lead Igniter Awards. And it's a really great way for us to recognize landowners and those lead igniters that are helping put fire on the ground in their community. Because I can tell you one thing about prescribed burn associations is that there's typically a couple people in there that really make the wheels turn in that thing, and they're really important. And to recognize them is really important. So currently in Nebraska, we have about 17 formal prescribed burn associations. We have a bunch of informal ones too, like most of these are probably all the ones that have the typical bylaws and kind of things happening. But there's a bunch of other groups that just a bunch of guys and girls are getting together and just burning, right? They're in their community. Most of them are on volunteer fire departments. And they're just getting together and going burning because that's what they need. So a lot of that doesn't get recognized, or we don't track that data because, what I'm going to show you later is like we track all this data because we have to track it in order to get grant funding to supply equipment and all this stuff. A couple things about PBAs is don't get stuck in the formation process. Like John was saying, you got some that are just like, we got to have this document and this document. It's like, don't worry about it. Like if you got a group of people that want to go out and burn and get a PBA going, just go burn. Just get it done. Don't worry about the liability or board insurance. Like I get those questions all the time from people starting new stuff, and that's great if you want to do that. But the most important thing is just to go out and start burning. And because the first burn is always the hardest one, and then they get easier and easier as you keep going on. And PBAs have a way better safety record. In Nebraska, one thing that we see for sure is that prescribed burn associations are far safer because, again, you're bringing together community members and your neighbors in on this burn. And it's really crucial because, you have that backing of your neighbors of like, yes, this is a recognized practice, an agricultural practice that's normal that we're going to be getting on a landscape. And so everybody's kind of, together. And it takes work to bring that community together. But when it does, again, spend that time creating that village, create that village, that community, it's a community, because again, it's not like a cover crop. You can just do it on your own. It literally takes your friends and neighbors and volunteer fire departments. And another one is just work for them. What do you guys need? If we need funding for putting on a barbecue or end of season tour, we do all those things. Oop, that went too fast. Oop. Sorry, I messed it up. Anyway, there's supposed to be two pictures on this slide. One was from burns that were happening in 2008 when we first started tracking our prescribed burn association data, and then also going in from 2019 to 2024. For some reason, we don't have 2018 data, but it kind of shows a distribution of where a lot of our burns are taking place. And of course, again, we're only tracking the burn associations that we kind of keep track of and, count the eggs and stuff for future grant funding and stuff like that. So there's a lot of other burns happening and stuff like that. But you can see there's definitely developed clusters that are happening. There's areas that are emerging across the state with burns. We also have other areas. On the previous map I was going to show you, we used to have a PBA kind of south of that middle dot in there. And they used to burn a lot, and they kind of had some turnover, and people lost interest, and most of that burning's gone from there. And so there's other organizations that are trying to figure out ways to get fire back into those areas. One thing that we do a lot too is just outreach. Again, building a culture is just about talking about it. I talked to one of my colleagues. He's just at a cover conference in Wisconsin this year, or just last week, and he said it takes an average of seeing something 7 times before a landowner acknowledges it. 7 times. So if a landowner only hears about a prescribed burn or prescribed burning once every 3 years, that's 20 years before they're even going to think about maybe accomplishing that on their land. So just put it in magazines, in your newspapers, doing interviews. We send out a lot of mailers. We do some social media, and we also do some conferences and expos. And I got a video I'm going to have them play here real quick. And one of my things, I wish we had an education and outreach coordinator in the state, because I would literally have that person on the road living in their car and in hotel rooms. They'd go to every farm expo, every ag expo, every 5th grade classroom, whatever event, every conference, training, whatever it may be. They'd just be living on the road talking about prescribed fire. And it's not getting fire on the ground, but again, just talking about it. But this is from a Ponca Expo. They bring in, 600 or 700 5th grade kids. And we developed this outreach game. It's called the Woody Encroachment Shooter Game. And it basically, you'll see it is, but basically they get to shoot cedar trees off the prairie and with pretend fire. And I'll have them play it and show you what it looks like. Kids love it.
Grasslands don't have trees. Grasslands need.
I'm telling you, I had those kids screaming. Every time they win again, I was like, I want it louder. I want the entire county to hear you. And everybody was like, what is going on over there screaming fire? And it's like, are you worried that you're gonna have a bunch of kids go home and start fires? And I was like, we make sure that we talk about that before we go in there. But another thing that we do too, we do the hay bale fire, the square bale fire, throw out a bunch of that stuff. That is such a cool thing, and the kids just love that. From an education and training standpoint, we do a lot of in-person basic workshops, learning the fundamentals of fire. And I always talk about, my dad was a flight doctor in the Air Force, and he's probably one of the smartest dudes I ever know. But I remember at 12 years old, he started a wildfire because he thought he was doing a prescribed fire, but he had no idea what he was doing. So just learning the basics of the fundamentals, the lingo, the rules, those are really important to understand before you kind of get out and start doing the fire. But, obviously, live fire training is really important. But we also do a bunch of really advanced topics too in our training. This year, we're doing a couple webinars, and one of them is how to train on the fire line. So as you're out burning, how is it best to help train others that are right beside you? Like, we kind of do this second nature when we're on burns, but how do we do it more effectively? How do we get our staff and our landowners, like, how do we get those people trained to be comfortable with fire and learn instead of just do it for them? Because I think too many times I've been on burns, what happens is somebody's like, needs something done, and instead of explaining the process and then tell them or showing them what to do, they'll just go do it themselves because it's easier. But in reality, what we really need to be doing is we can explain that process, show them how to do it, and then go let them do it, because that's how you learn. We also do a bunch of tours, and then we also do our in-person. We also do a bunch of online webinars, because there's a lot of people that just Google stuff and they just randomly find it, and that's needed as well. And another in-person thing is, and I'll talk about this later, but sorry, I'm going to go way over time. But the other thing that we've been doing is I got fire specialists and pharmacobiologists that show up in people's barns and give a presentation or talk or just discussion with like 3 people. I mean, that's about what we need to do.
You've got 12 minutes.
12 minutes?
No need to rush.
Okay, perfect. I got like 30 minutes left of my presentation.
Oh, never mind.
Again, so throughout the years, we do like an introduction to prescribed fire. Just a few years ago, we started doing prescribed fire refreshers, just like kind of a basic, like, hey, what's happening, weather forecast, climate forecast, what are some of the things that we saw last year as we were all out burning with people, like some minor things that need to be corrected. These all are on our YouTube page if you ever want to check them out. But we also do burn planning, we'll have fire effects. We do trainings on equipment, like how to build equipment, what types of different equipment, safety. And another thing we just launched was a lessons learned, if you're a QR code person. This is basically a platform where people can share kind of their general lessons learned. And it doesn't have to be like, hey, we had an escape fire and here's the lessons. It could literally be like, hey, we had too hot of a drip torch mixture, or our radios died. Like small minor things that you don't think other people would need to know about or learn about. People that are new to fire, or even people that have been around fire, can pull things from these lessons learned and think about it. Again, it goes back to that beginning slide where it's that muscle memory. The more we do it, the more we talk about it, the better it's going to be for everybody in the future. Because as prescribed fire, as we scale up, get more fire on the ground, inevitably we're going to have more incidents, or potentially more incidents happen on the landscape. And so we want to have some sort of accountability that, hey, we're not just like letting people blindly do whatever they want. Like, we're providing these volunteer training opportunities. But the big thing is that these are not requirements, right? Everything that we do is a voluntary basis. So if you're seeking out information or want information, we're there to provide it for you. But I don't care if you come to our workshops or trainings and you're burning just fine on your own, you don't need our information, all power to you. I mean, the Flint Hills, for example, they don't need trainings and workshops and lessons learned. They've been burning for 80, 90 years. But in a lot of cases, people are new to fire, and we need to provide that relevant information to them. Most of our live fire training is done on live PBA burns. We just go out and we send a lot of times we send our staff. We'll send them out and basically allow landowners to help train our staff, because landowners are better burners than we are. And again, like John said, every burn is a training burn. We do some more formal burns occasionally too. Whoa. Oh, that's not good. Well, anyway, so again, we do a bunch of different workshops and trainings, education on the landscape. This last picture here, this was actually a training burn that we did, and we actually ended up shutting it down. And everybody kind of felt bad, but it's actually one of the best learning things that could ever happen on one of our trainings, because it shows that, hey, if things aren't right or things are going wrong, it's okay to shut down a burn or not even light the match that day. Oh. And then this one, every time I post this picture, everybody just screams at me, oh my God, where's his long sleeve shirt? Where's his Nomex and stuff like that? But Like, he's on a gravel road, he's away from fire, he's a kid, he's got professionals, people know around. And then before that, there was another picture that I messed up. But there's like a 3-year-old or 4-year-old kid. We were doing a growing season burn, and there's one tree, the cedar tree, that did not get torched up. Like, all the needles are still on there. And he comes over to his dad, and he kind of comes up kind of slyly, and he's like, that tree's not dead. And so his dad and I, we scraped up a bunch of grass and threw it underneath the tree and let him take the drip torch over there, and he got to watch the tree go up in flames, and he loved it. Anyway, again, part of that building up fire culture for that next generation too. We do a lot of workshops, tours. We've done 202 workshops with about 5,500 people come through them, and about 36 tours with over 1,600 people that have come through that training. A couple of the ones that we did this fire and fermentation one. This was kind of geared to our Omaha and Lincoln crowds. Like, hey, you want to come out and talk about fire, like wildfire, prescribed fire, come drink some craft beer with us and go through all this stuff. It's really cool. We had over 90 people show up that didn't even know what a prescribed burn was. They just came for the beer, I guess. But they left there pretty knowledgeable. We actually played Prescribed Fire Jeopardy. If you never played, it's awesome. The other one, again, my slides are messed up, but the Fire Seasonality and Frequency Tour was a really cool one. We actually, on one piece of property, we actually burned in December, April, and then August. And they were all connected, so they all met at one point. And so we brought over 100 people came out to this tour, and we looked at the effects on the grass, the cedar trees, forage, all those different things. And then we talked about the different conditions and the limitations of burning during which times of year, and what was best. And it was a really kind of a unique tour that we put together. Again, a lot of our training, sometimes after a fire, we're sitting on the tailgate or the back of a trailer talking about the fire and learning for the next time or planning for the next time. That is such a valuable time to make sure that you have with people that you're burning, because again, we're talking about building fire culture and building your fire community. And I get, some people have, the calving to get done and stuff like that and need to take off, but this time right here is one of those critical times to get people bonding and building your village. How much time I got left?
10 minutes.
Oh, sweet.
Five.
5, okay. I was going to say, that felt like longer than 2 minutes talking. Some of the programs, again, EQIP is one of the big things that we utilize in our prescribed fire process. But one thing that we had found, of course, is that the EQIP process for some landowners and for people like me can also be some cumbersome at times. And so we, in the state of Nebraska, just PF, and for example, we have a kind of a grant-funded supplement. It's a standalone program to help basically kind of streamline work. So one thing that happened this year is we got a ton of rain this early spring. And one of the ranchers came to us and said, hey, I got a bunch of forage that I could probably burn this fall. And we're like, cool, we have money for prep work or cutting trees or something like that. And so that's something that we can't really do with EQIP because there's deadlines, and then they got to wait for ranking, and sometimes that's just too much. And so we're putting that on the landscape as fast as we can. It's called for Pathways for Wildlife, again, providing a 75% cost share on practices, whether it's prescribed fire, deferment, fire break prep, tree clearing, annual forage. One thing, my recommendation for you guys in South Dakota too is when you're talking to a landowner about prescribed fire, and if the first thing you mention about prescribed fire is deferment, you'll never see a landowner brain turn off faster. Because what you're telling them is that it's like telling a corn and soybean farmer, hey, don't plant corn next year. And you're like, what? And even if you do provide a payment, it's just like with cattle, it's like, where are you going to put them, right? You're going to have to find another spot, annual forage. So there's a lot of things that you have to figure out. So one of the things we did with our program is that we have a partial deferment program in there. But then also I would say don't get stuck in the deferment mentality either. You may not get all the fire, the kill, cedar mortality that you're looking for without full deferment, but getting that fire on that landscape sometimes is more important. And then a lot of times that landowner or rancher will come back and be like, oh man, if we would have deferred, we could have killed way more trees. And then their brain starts turning and saying, all right, I'm going to figure out a way to defer, how I'm going to make it work. And so, because we fell into the kind of deferment trap for a long time as well, that happens. The other cool program that I'll just touch on is we just started doing a volunteer fire equipment program, basically providing some equipment to increase support and cooperation with prescribed fire with our VFDs. And these are available for landowners to check out, but also available to the VFDs for wildfires and stuff that happen on the landscape. We have a bunch of resources that we provide to. Again, I talked about the lessons learned. We have a Prescribed Fire Nebraska book. We just did this checklist here. We have a new thing coming out this spring. It's going to be like position descriptions with checklists for every position on a fire, which is really cool. We have PBA resources like example templates of bylaws. We also have things like winterization checklist, maintenance checklist, just stuff like, you may not need it, but we put it together and it's there if you want to take it and modify it and use it as your own. The other thing I did for our staff is I realized a lot of our staff are writing burn plans, and they were going through and creating, a layer in ArcGIS Pro or whatever. So I created a feature template layer to write burn plans more efficiently and faster for our staff. We called it ArcPyro, and basically you can just open this thing up and just plan a burn within like 5 minutes, which is really cool. Again, I don't know why my pictures are messed up, but we have 17 trailers across the state that basically are, we basically hand off to these PBAs. Like, hey, you want to start a PBA? We're like, cool, here's a trailer with $30,000 worth of equipment. We got 2 200-gallon skid units, drip torches galore, all this really cool stuff in there. Man, I wish I really could see oh man, I'm so disappointed that these pictures didn't show. Anyway, so don't forget about the landowners that are getting their own equipment too. When you're providing funding for equipment, a lot of landowners are building these taking these old military trucks and putting big water tanks on them, things of that nature. This is a fuel wagon for one of the PBAs. That's all full of drip torch fuel that they haul around all season long, and they basically fill up their jugs and stuff like that. I mean, stuff like that equipment is essential for PBA. So, our agency folks, we can provide all this like cool, fancy equipment, but the coolest equipment out there is the ones that these landowners start building after they figure out what their needs are. So currently across the state, here's a map of where all of our equipment is. We got, about 18 UTV sprayers out there, close to 40 truck skids, bunch of radios, drip torches, Nomex, whatever, all of these kind of containers. We do currently maintain all the equipment in the state of all of our trailers, and we do that for a selfish reason, because I use it to teach my staff, or our staff within Pheasants Forever. I teach them, maintenance and stuff like that, so they're able to, move on with their careers and stuff like that. 1 minute, perfect. Give me like 6. This is our staff. So the way our fire works, we have farm biologists all across the state, and we provide, they basically kind of have these like kind of core areas that they deal with. And what we do is we call them basically mother hens to PBAs and landowners in the area, that they're basically there to kind of help guide along and help them burn and train and do workshops and all these different things. We have currently right now within our organization in Nebraska, we got about 14 crew members, 6 crew bosses, 8 burn bosses, and 4 new hires that kind of just started that we're working on getting that. But one thing I want you to know is that in Nebraska, all of our farm biologists fire is not their main job duty. They have all these other responsibilities of dealing with CRP, cover crops, all this other stuff. And we track all their training and fires and positions. We get some really cool tools that we utilize to do that. But they've helped over 200,000 acres in the state, and they learn from landowners and experienced staff as they're coming up. Like, not requiring them to go through some like NWCG training. We don't make them wear shelters. Like, I would prefer if we could just like let them go out in regular ranch clothes, but they do make us wear Nomex. And we have staff that kind of gone on to work in private public lands across this country too. So with that, so we currently have 3 full-time PFQF staff in Nebraska. Myself, I started in 15. Just this last year, I hired 2 prescribed fire specialists. There are 4 other full-time prescribed fire people in the state of Nebraska at different organizations. And then we also have 2 part-time. They're like contract employees that kind of come in and help with some things too. But our pharmacobiologist and our prescribed fire specialists all work on these things, right? They work on contracts and PBA assistance, burn plans, education, outreach, training, site visits. The one thing is we don't act as a live fire contractor. So if a landowner comes to us and say, "Hey, I want to burn," we're not just going to go burn, because if we did that, like, we would basically be swamped and we wouldn't be able to do anything else. And with just 3 of us full timers, it'd be very tough for us. And so part of my guidance to our staff is we're basically only helping private landowners burn if there is a larger goal of developing that village, of that PBA, to make sure that it's sustainable if one of them leaves. Like, let's say like if all of a sudden we're all gone and then there's no fire left on the landscape. So we have to be developing and building something in order for us to really kind of come out and help. It sounds weird or sounds bad, but just our capacity. Our prescribed fire specialists are more focused, right? They're full-time fire. So just as an example, their job is to, I said, if you are out driving around and you see a rancher fixing fence or, doing cutting trees or something, I said, get out of your truck and go help them. Go talk to them. Example on this one here, did my thing get messed up? Oh, no, it did. It's backwards. I don't know why it's backwards. All right, so this was the original burn unit that got set up, and one of my prescribed fire specialists came in, and it's not going to work right. He came in and basically said, all right, well, you guys got this one burn unit, and what he did is he sent out flyers, he went knocking on doors, and he took that burn unit from 600 acres to 1,700 acres. So, dramatically, just by calling and talking to people, knocking on doors and making relationships, like, hey, we just almost doubled or over doubled our burn unit size by knocking on these doors. That's something that sometimes our farm bill biologists can't do. So you can kind of see when the little transition is, how it kind of grew and expanded there. Also for funding, again, I'm not a money guy, but just like my 110-pound chocolate lab, we have people in Nebraska that the only thing they think about is money, just like my dog thinks about food. So a lot of them, our big partners are our State Game Commission, NRCS, of course, NIFWIF. We also have our chapters, donations, U.S. Fish and Wildlife. The one thing I'll point out is our Nebraska Environmental Trust. This is actually money that comes from the sale of lottery proceeds that go to environmental causes. And they've been a huge supporter of prescribed fire in Nebraska and getting a lot of our equipment. I think we totaled it up the other day. We got a little over $1 million worth of equipment out there, and most of that comes from them. So we're very fortunate to have that. So last couple slides. So again, a change in culture is a slow process. Don't expect, 100,000 acres a year right off the gate. It'd be great if you did. It takes a sustainable effort. And a big thing is remove barriers, don't create them. There's a lot of barrier creators out there. Don't be one of them. If there's any barrier that comes up, remove it instantly or fight against it. Time is not also something that's not on our side, right? We talk about the Green Glacier. The glacier is moving a lot faster than people think. So you get burning. And my final thought is as much as we want fire everywhere, sometimes aiming smaller is more efficient, impactful, and successful. And this is not from a size standpoint. This is from impact and resource driven, right? Aiming small, focusing on building those villages is going to get you further than just throwing fire wherever you can. For every person that walks in the door, we're going to burn. that's not going to get us anywhere. We need to focus on building those villages, provide that opportunity to engage, and also don't shy away from supporting prescribed fire. One final story that I'll share with you guys is that 2 years ago, our governor shut down prescribed fire, took away the ability of our volunteer fire departments to issue burn permits. And when he did that, there was a huge backlash from the volunteer fire departments and from the landowners. Now, that's something that maybe 10, 15 years ago, we wouldn't have seen. And that's a huge stepping stone. We've also had a couple fires get out, cause a little bit of damage. But those PBAs and those groups that it happened to, they're back burning again, right? Same landowners, same villages are burning. So with that, I'll take any questions. This QR code leads to our PFQF Nebraska Fire. There's nothing currently on it because I created it yesterday. But if you save the link, there'll be cool resources on there. So.